Good afternoon, New York, and the rest of our listeners around the globe. My name is June Stoyer, and I'm the host of the Organic View radio show. Our podcast is available on iTunes, Zune, and all major podcast providers. So if you can't catch the show live, you can download it or simply use our free podcast player, which is available on our website at www.theorganicview.com. If you'd like to connect with us, please post a question on our wall on Facebook or send me a tweet at June Stoyer on Twitter. If you'd like to be on the show or would like to find out about sponsorship opportunities, please contact us at questions@theorganicview.com. Today's show is sponsored by MyMumble.com, one of the leading voice chat service providers with locations all over the world. MyMumble offers free 5-seat voice chat service for life, as well as higher capacity plans for any group that requires a secure environment for confidential communication. Listeners of The Organic View can receive 15% off on monthly recurring power servers by using the coupon code ORGVIEW. For more promotional offers, please visit our website at www.theorganicview.com. Also, don't forget to check out our contest section on our website for your chance to win one of our cool prizes. For more information, please visit www.theorganicview.com/contests. On today's show, elephant advocate Ashley McAvey is going to talk about an effort to push through a full ban on the sale of ivory and rhino horns in the state of Vermont. So I'd like to welcome to the show Ashley McAvey. Good afternoon, Ashley, and welcome to the show.
Hi, June. Thanks so much for having me.
Ashley, could you take a moment to share a little bit about yourself with our listeners and what got you started with this whole initiative?
Absolutely. It's my pleasure, and thank you. So I had the very good fortune of being able to go to Africa when I was 16. I saw my first elephant in the wild, and I met the people there, the stewards of these animals. I also bottle-fed an orphaned rhino that was orphaned from poaching, and that trip really had a profound impact on me. After I left Zimbabwe, I continuing to follow the poaching crisis and what was happening, but life gets busy, and I just kind of would make my annual donation to African wildlife groups and just kind of I hope and pray that things would get better. It was I believe it was October 2012 cover story of National Geographic on blood ivory that really kind of woke me up and made me take my head out of the sand. And I was not only angry, but I felt so hopeless. And I thought that that we can't let this happen. Western black rhinos are gone from the wild, and I couldn't believe that more people didn't have this on their radar screen. So I, at that point, decided I have to do something. So I organized an airing of Battle for the Elephants, the National Geographic documentary that came out a few months later at the University of Vermont, and we had an incredibly well-attended airing. I had the writer, producer, and director John Hemingway fly out from Montana. He was on a panel with 3 other experts. There was a lot of awareness. After that, I thought, okay, this is great. There's a lot of awareness now, so what's next? And it became very clear that the next step for anybody who wanted to really try to do something was legislation. So that's when I jumped in and realized, again, nobody else was going to do it. Even though people were all very compassionate, people have a lot on their plates, it became clear that I would take the lead. And I immediately found 2 lead sponsors, both a Republican and a Democrat. This is not a partisan issue. And I got 2 great folks on board, Representative Kurt Wright and Representative Joan Lennis, and we've been running with it ever since.
I'm just curious, when did you realize that Vermont sells or permits the sale and purchase of ivory and rhino horns? Because most people think of Vermont as this very liberal state where they're very particular about what they allow to happen, especially when it comes to different environment issues as well as wildlife.
It's a great question, and kind of what happened was actually just a year or 2 ago, a very good friend of mine who lives here in Vermont, she's actually from South Africa, and she, like me, is an elephant advocate. She kind of called me and she said, I was just in this antique store in a town near us, and she said they had a whole cabinet that just had ivory in it. And it kind of the light bulb went off, and it was kind of like, wow, I could leave my house and drive 10 minutes away, and I can buy ivory. Now, the fact that, as I'm sure you and many of your listeners know, up to 90% of quote-unquote antique ivory is actually new ivory. The fact that you can go into an antique store and buy a piece of ivory, it just made me think, wait, something is wrong here. And so that was really kind of when I started kind of connecting the dots, along with the event that I spearheaded at the University of Vermont at the Rubenstein School of Environment and Natural Resources. Everything kind of came together around that time for me to realize that China, being the largest villain in the equation in terms of bringing in illegal ivory, the U.S. is the second biggest villain here. And so, we can't make the rules in China, but we certainly can make the rules here in the U.S. And that's when it kind of became clear that having a ban on the ivory trade and the rhino horn trade was an absolutely necessary first step if we're going to have any say in how the world views what we're doing, and if we have any sway with impacting other countries.
Now, it's very interesting that in the news there's so much activity with these terrorist groups, right. And most people don't understand how the ivory trade as well as the rhino horn trade connects directly with terrorism. So could you take a moment and explain to our listeners why this needs to be banned and how it ties directly in to supporting these terrorist activities?
Absolutely. And I think some people are kind of, and I will say, I put New Jersey on a huge pedestal. I think the whole country needs to look to New Jersey. New Jersey did this. They were the first state in the country to do this last year with a full ban without exemptions, and they should be so proud. And I actually spent a lot of time reaching out to New Jersey businesses to kind of see what happened. Has your economy been crippled? Are you, is New Jersey still alive? And the answer is, of course it is. I think one of the reasons when some people say, well, how did New Jersey do this? I think that our team did a really good job demonstrating that connection. There is, without a doubt, a direct connection between terrorism and blood ivory. There's a wonderful group out of Seattle, the Tusk Task Force, which I highly encourage folks to look at. Tusk Task Force, what they're doing is they're trying to bring this fact to life and really to have folks understand that whether you buy a piece of old ivory or new ivory, it is somehow funding some of the world's worst terrorist groups. Catherine Bigelow did a beautiful job with a 3-minute, very short movie called The Last Days of Ivory, which I also encourage folks to check out. And in it, she has actual footage, real live footage from the Westgate Mall attack in Kenya, where 67 people perished at the hands of al-Shabaab. Now, al-Shabaab, it was pointed out in this very short film, brings in $600,000 per month in blood ivory money. So without a doubt, that connection needs to be made. And again, I think New Jersey, they got that. They got that connection, and they wanted nothing to do with this nefarious trade.
And al-Shabaab also has pledged their allegiance to ISIS. Correct. And that's something that people need to be well aware of. So the bottom line is, patriots, and I'm addressing this to you.
Yep.
For those of you that love our country and do not support terrorism, any support of these trades could be considered an act of terrorism because you're supporting the funding of terrorist activities.
Yeah, I think the connection absolutely needs to be made. And the issue, what I'm hearing and what I think is also really important to look at is kind of what the opposition is saying. And as John Fishman, the drummer for the band Phish, he came and testified on the 8th and did just a masterful job. He referred to this whole situation and this legislation we're trying to push forward as a quote-unquote no-brainer. I think that people really need to understand that this is a no-brainer, but we are trying to listen to what the opposition is saying. And when they're saying that, oh, this is not fair, I won't be able to sell my grandmother's old piano unless I strip off the ivory keys, our response is elephants are going to be gone from the wild in 5 to 10 years if we don't act. Something that's extremely poignant and important to me are the lives of these rangers in Africa who are risking their lives every single day, and thousands of them are being shot dead. Oftentimes they're the sole income earners for their family. So when I hear an antique store owner say, this will hurt my business, and usually I will add, the ivory sales are a very small part of their business. I have yet to find an antique store that has a huge portion of ivory. And when they say to me, this is going to hurt my business, I'd like to tell them, do you know what's at stake and what's happening in Africa right now? Rangers are dying. That's a burden. That's a sacrifice.
But I'd like to point out that if that's the case where, say, you do have an antique that contains a piece of ivory in whatever the piece is, you can have that component removed and replaced, and it still will not lose the value of that piece in most cases. And furthermore, if you were to try to sell it, most people would not be in support of buying that because most people do have children. What I'm hearing from a lot of grandparents is, will there be elephants that are alive by the time my grandchild is old enough to speak? And you're talking about grandchildren that are babies, and in just a matter of a few years. That's the critical point that we're at, where this entire species may be extinct in less than 5 years. And Ashley, from what I understand, you also have children.
I do.
So I would think, as a mother, I would think that this especially hits home and is also very personal, because I would also expect that you would want your children to be able to know what an actual elephant sounds like, looks like, so on and so forth, and not have to go to a place like the Bronx Zoo. They have a special area in the zoo where they feature all these different birds, and in some cases they don't have pictures, they just have the names and the dates of extinction because they don't know what they look like. And that is something that could very well happen.
Absolutely. And I think you're absolutely right. I think kind of the bigger lesson that I'm very proud of, I think, is universal. And when I've spoken to kids in a bunch of classrooms here in Vermont, is the fact that you have the power to make a difference. And again, I think it's been really good for kids to see that they can make a difference. A bunch of the kids who I've spoken to and talked to in classrooms, they've made drawings of elephants, they've written out beautiful poems, they've drawn pictures, they've written letters. 20 kids recently at a local middle school wrote each beautifully written letters and sent them to Chairman Dean, the chairman of the committee where this bill is currently sitting. And it made me very proud, because I think they get, this is far away, it's a really big crisis, but I have a say here, and I can do something. We had a 6th grader actually testify, and you could have heard a pin drop in the room. It was amazing, and I mean, that's a 6th grader who's doing something. So I think that you're absolutely right. And again, I think, a lot of folks will say, oh, that's so far away. It's so far away, and why does this matter? It matters in such a huge way. It would be such an embarrassment to humanity if we let elephants go. And like you said, the only spot you can see them are in zoos. So I really think that the notion that we're teaching kids to look beyond their sphere and realize that we're all connected, and we really do need to come together on this issue.
Ashley, how can people get involved to help support your efforts?
It's an excellent question, and I cannot underestimate the importance of people reaching out. A lot of times, especially if you're driving in the car, you're doing your thing, you think, okay, well, I hope somebody else does that because I'm not going to have time. Really, taking 30 seconds out of your day can make a huge difference. Legislators, they make the rules. They decide what passes and goes forward and what doesn't, and they have to hear from constituents. So I guess the big thing is, if any of your listeners have family or friends in the state of Vermont, please contact them and call them. The decision will be made soon whether or not this will pass out of committee. And the best thing to do, I would say, would be to contact Representative David L. Dean. He is the chairman of the committee, the House Committee on Fish, Wildlife, and Water Resources, which again is a 9-member committee, very engaged individuals, and I think they're doing a really good job of fact-finding. And they need to hear from folks, and I can give you his email address if you think folks might remember that.
That would be great. Please do it.
Thank you. So again, he's Representative Dean, D-E-E-N, and his address is ddeen@ledge.state.vt.us. And again, it's D-E-E-N, @ledge.state.vt.us. And a simple email saying you're in full support of H297 without exemptions would be amazing. And that's really what we need to spread the word and make sure that this gets out of committee and that it has a chance on passing.
Once again, folks, that's ddeen@leg.state.vt.us, and that's in regards to H297 without exemptions. And folks, it doesn't matter if you live in the state of Vermont. There are a lot of people who vacation in Vermont, especially enjoy the skiing and all the winter activities, as well as one of the biggest crops that comes out of Vermont, which is maple syrup. So if that's something that you enjoy, make sure that you write to Mr. Dean and let him know that if he supports this, then perhaps you should not support the purchase of some of these things that come out of Vermont, because what happens in Vermont affects all of us. Ashley, thank you again for being on the show. It has been a pleasure, and I really hope you come back to give us an update on all of your efforts, and hopefully you will have victory.
I'd be delighted, June. Thank you so much, and thank you to all of your listeners for caring about this. It means so much to me.
And folks, thank you so much for tuning in. Please check out the companion article, which will be available at theorganicview.com, as well as our monthly contests, which you can visit by going to www.theorganicview.com/contests. Have a great afternoon, everyone.